Anarchy is the simple recognition that no man, woman, or group thereof is ever wise enough to come up with the best possible way to run other people's lives, just as no one else could be able to enforce on you his choice of a marriage partner or compel you to follow a career of his choosing. No one else should be able to enforce his preferences for social organization upon you. Welcome to Keith Knight, Don't Tread on Anyone, and the Libertarian Institute. Today I have Shane of What's HAPAning. Shane, thank you for joining me. Where is the best place to find your archive of work?
Well, the internet, for sure. But no, seriously. So just look up What's HAPAning, and that's spelled HAPANING. And that's our podcast. So if you look that up on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and also over at Odyssey, BitChute, YouTube, you can find us there. Or you can also look up Hapa Supremacy. You can also find us there too. So, but the podcast name is called What's HAPAning.
Sounds good. All of those links will be in the description below. Shane, how would you describe anarcho-capitalism to someone completely unfamiliar with the ideas?
Well, I'm sure you have a lot of anarcho-capitalists or ANCAPs that watch your show. So I'm just going to go right off the bat and say that me talking about anarcho-capitalism, they're probably going to be shaking their head because that's something that I've been grappling with. I see people say that anarcho-capitalism is like an oxymoron because they'll say, well, capitalism is a system with a government, and then of course anarchy or anarcho is no government. So it doesn't seem like those would fit too well. They would seem like oxymorons. But for someone who's not familiar with it and to kind of help, I guess, better explain it, it would just be to let the free market kind of, I guess, correct itself, or to help kind of the economy get where it needs to be, because what we're living in right now obviously isn't an ANCAP society or even really a capitalist society. We're kind of, especially now with all the COVID stuff that's happened, we're living in a more of a fascist society. So I don't know, that's probably not really answering your question, but it's just something that I've been kind of grappling with myself. So even me, I'm not even 100% familiar with anarcho-capitalism. So Keith, how would you describe anarcho-capitalism to me?
I would describe it as a society where there is the no institutionalized recognition of any person or group of people having the right to initiate aggression or physical interference with anyone else. So the only two ways that human beings could achieve their ends would be through voluntary exchange, contract, or original appropriation, which is mixing their labor or contracting with other people with unowned property or virgin land, so to speak. That's how I do it to you. To the average person, I'd say it would be separation of economy and state for the same reason we have separation of church and state. All interactions should be voluntary. What makes government unique is it claims the right to initiate aggression against peaceful people. That is probably what I would say. You had mentioned that Anatomy of the State was a book that you said pretty much got you really interested in a lot of these ideas. What are some of the things you learned from Anatomy of the State and Murray Rothbard?
Well, just that simple question of do you hate the state, I think it kind of encapsulates everything. But yeah, that book is interesting because the way that he kind of described government, like you were saying, they have this, the monopoly on force and violence and everything like that. It was something where someone with a virgin mind like myself, kind of looking into these ideas, it was mind-blowing, I guess you could say. And I didn't even know about Anatomy of the State until I first started listening to Part of the Problem with Dave Smith. So Dave Smith is really the reason that I kind of got into libertarianism in the first place, or at the very least got interested in those ideas, because, and I wish I knew exactly the episode that I watched or listened to, because at the time I was a Compound Media subscriber, and he's 1/3 of the Legion of Skanks, and they used to be a part of Compound Media. And it's funny because at the time I wasn't really like Legion of Skanks was just there. I was mainly to watch Anthony Cumia's show, but maybe they had a guest on or someone that I was interested in. Maybe Anthony was on. I don't know 100%, but maybe Dave mentioned, oh yeah, I'm host of Part of the Problem as well. Or I'm doing his events or something like that. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll listen to Part of the Problem. And then just how he was talking about politics and everything like that was really eye-opening, because someone like me, where I was only familiar with Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, that was about it. That was pretty much what I was thinking of. Oh, it's just the two parties, and that's it. You know, it's just McCain, Obama. That's it. That's who you got. So pick who you're gonna get. Democracy, right? Democracy at work. So I know I'm kind of going all over the place with your original question, but that's what led me to Anatomy of the State. And I don't know, it's interesting because I think someone who isn't even a libertarian can look at that book, and even if they don't become a full-fledged libertarian or anarchist, even a minarchist, I guess you could say, they can look at it and read it and everything and be like, well, that was really interesting, because he kind of he says things in that, like I was just saying, I hadn't even contemplated before.
I know it's really unbelievable. Like on page 11, he just sums it up so clearly. Rothbard says, the state is that organization in society which attempts to maintain a monopoly on the use of force and violence in a given territorial area. In particular, it is the only organization in society that obtains its revenue not by voluntary contribution or payment for services rendered, but by coercion. When I read that, it was just almost life-changing, because I had so long I had talked about what government should do, what it shouldn't do, who's running it, how civics works, and I never had a consistent definition of government the whole time. Was just getting a solid definition so much of a red pill for you that it almost just follows logically. If you really know what it is, you either are not thinking about it or you're kind of immoral.
Yeah, you're kind of, I guess, making excuses for what the government is doing to people. And I mean, just as of this recording, tax day was just around the corner, or we just passed it or whatever. And that's one of those things, because oh yeah, you hear that old that phrase everyone says, well, there's only two things that are inevitable: death and taxes. But then when you Anatomy of the State and just other libertarian works, you think, well, of course death, everybody dies, but taxes weren't around, I'm pretty sure. I mean, maybe they were back, because that's one of the reasons why the colonies started existing, was because, oh, taxation with representation, T's at a 2% tax, we don't like this, and now everybody makes this, well, you got to pay your taxes to have the roads built or whatever, or you got to have taxes paid so that we can go and bomb Afghanistan or something like that, So.
And then on page 53, I think he also does an excellent job. Just as the two basic and mutually exclusive interrelations between men are peaceful cooperation or coercive exploitation, production or predation, so the history of mankind, particularly its economic history, may be considered as a contest between these two principles. I think that's so vitally important, because what are the two divides today? Black versus white, Mexican versus American, man versus woman, and rich versus poor, when those are so obviously fake and fraudulent. How do you get people, if you do, to stop seeing things through this arbitrary false divide and get them to see things on principle?
Well, I mean, you kind of just also said it, where they kind of try and pin or divide everybody with this black and white, or they basically trying to divide everyone with race or anything like that, and all that. But with principle, I think how I try and do it, especially on our podcast, is to kind of just show that it doesn't matter whether they have an R or a D next to their name. They're all corrupt. they're all blood-soaked monsters, and they're all just, it's just a game, really. And they're supposed to represent you. That's why some of them are called representatives, but they clearly don't. I mean, like some of the representatives are still trying to make these excuses to where we need to stay in the Middle East when the people are clearly in favor of getting the troops out. But if they're supposed to represent us, 80% of Americans or of my constituents, whatever, think that we should get out. Okay, well, I will vote to get them to get the people out, to get the military out of Afghanistan. Nah, I'm good. I have all this money that's coming in from the military industrial complex and all these lobbyists and everything like that. Israel lobby. I'm all right. I'm gonna keep. I got, man, those pockets of money that I got, they're deep. I don't want to get rid of that. So I basically try and show people just how much of a scam it all is, really, as best as I possibly can, and try in some layman way. I try to do it like that.
Dave Smith obviously has really been a big influence on both of us. He wrote the foreword to Pete Quinones' book. He says, "It is equally ridiculous that libertarians still must argue our case. After all, what civilized person would not embrace the principle of non-aggression? Who would reject the philosophy of peace and prosperity? While the socialist nightmare was playing out, the 20th century saw those countries that embrace individual liberty, or at least did a far better job of it, enjoy a level of wealth and comfort never experienced in history. In the 21st century, hundreds of millions had been pulled out of extreme poverty by market liberalization. The Marxist, socialist experiments that are still taking place, Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea, to name a few, all share the classic features of mass poverty, starvation, and a totalitarian state." How do you think such evil ideas are able to last so long?
Well, I think if you tried real socialism, then it would work. Isn't that the correct answer?
Of course, it's always that it wasn't the right person. See, whenever the free market fails, it's inherently bad. Like, they would never give us the leeway of saying, you know what, those were some bad CEOs of those companies, so we just need different CEOs. So now
Right.
you're never going to stop us. We're always going to have if only a different CFO or a COO had been in a higher position. Of course, it's so hard to falsify. Have you found anything really beneficial when it comes to communicating the ideas of freedom that sort of just really red pill someone or wake them up to the nature of the state or the evils of socialism and statism?
Well, kind of going back to the answer that I said before, just kind of showing that it doesn't matter whether they have an R or D next to their name. You really kind of have to look at their actions more than what they say, because they'll say, oh yeah, I think this and that or whatever, but then when you look at their voting record, it's a completely different story. And I think with showing that, because like Bernie Sanders is a big name, that he's a big guy that's trying to get all the socialist like proposals in or whatever, but even with that, even with him being in there, they kind of look at him as this, they kind of look at him with one eye open, like, I don't know about this guy. And then AOC as well, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and I guess I don't know what the team is that she has, the other three, the squad, that's it, the squad. But I mean, I don't know. The whole thing is just stupid.
As far as other things you've learned from Dave Smith, I just love what a great communicator he is. I think he's so cool. He can talk to Ben Burgess, Nick Fuentes, Anthony Cumia, of course. And,
Right.
When Jim Norton, Anthony Cumia, and Dave Smith are together, I'm just like in heaven. They're like just my favorite people. What are some other things, whether they're like empirical knowledge you got from Dave Smith or just ways of communicating that you thought were beneficial?
Well, one of the things that, just the overall thing that he was talking about was, I know a few years ago, net neutrality was a huge issue. and everybody was saying, "Oh, get rid of net neutrality. Internet's gonna go. We're gonna have to pay $1,000 for internet." And those tweets you're seeing where like one line and then another space, one line, because internet's going to be downloading at super slow speeds if we get rid of net neutrality. And he was just like, well, I mean, as far as I know, net neutrality hasn't been around forever. It's only been around for not too long. And then, of course, now net neutrality is no longer around, and we're doing this fine. Everybody can watch it fine. Everybody's still got Wi-Fi. Everybody's still watching videos on YouTube and Odyssey or whatever. So, I mean, as far as I know, it wasn't a problem with net neutrality not being there. And so I know that was a big thing that he was talking about, just those few episodes that he did about net neutrality. And then also, I think the biggest thing that he would talk about is just the wars. And I mean, I joked with him when he did that Reason debate at the SOA Forum with Nick Sarwark, and I was basically joking with him, saying that because I asked Nick Sarwark a question about what's his biggest issue and everything like that, and I said, well, I already know what Dave's answer is going to be. It's the wars, and because all he talks about on his podcast is Libya and Yemen. It's like, we get it, So,
what did Nick say his biggest issue was?
The war on drugs.
Okay, that's not terrible.
Yeah,
just because that really is the root of so much. Like whenever the cops are saying, well, let me talk to you, let me get a little more information, let me search your car, all these encroachments. It's not, well, I suspect you of rape, murder, kidnapping, and slavery. It's always, you might have drugs on you. That's always their justification. So it's just like this little tyranny window that they could open up at any time and reach in.
You also see videos of them planting drugs on people. They go, oh, he had weed on him. But
oh my God.
It's like, oh shit, there's weed right there. There was that one video that was going viral just recently where I guess it was the guy's daughter's ashes or something. But they're saying, oh, we gotta test this for drugs, whatever. And he was like, no, it's my daughter's ashes and some little necklace thing that he had on. And it was so stupid and ridiculous. It was just, it broke your heart when you're watching this, because the guy's just pleading, please, let's give me back my daughter. And they're like, nah, we got to test it. Everyone's laughing. All the cops like, oh, this is great. What do we got to do? Oh, really? Okay. And I don't know. I think just that in general is just, I don't know how you can make it.
When someone says to you, I'm terrified of a world where there aren't drug laws, I feel like everyone's going to be using and everything. Do you ever try to persuade them that the ideas of voluntarism will not lead to the chaotic world they so often fear it will?
Well, even with the drug laws that we have now, people are still doing them. So obviously the laws aren't working, or at the very least not 100% how they're supposed to, whatever. Because it's like Ron Paul said when he was talking about just getting rid of the war on drugs and all that. It's like, do you think, like, he was polling, I can't remember what state he was, but it was in one of those Republican debates, and he was like, how many of you people would just start shooting up cocaine if they got rid of all the drug laws? And of course, probably hardly, maybe one person would do it, but I know I wouldn't, because I see the effects of it and how harmful it can be. So I'm like, oh, well, I guess once the laws are gone, I guess I'll just start snorting coke.
Well, also during alcohol prohibition, you had to hide it because the state was going to kidnap you. Yeah. So what you would do is you'd have a much more dangerous, higher potent amount in moonshine, and moonshine was very popular. And now today, because it's not illegal, you can drink beer, and it's not everyone is using moonshine. So no, not everyone would be using meth. People would be using some derivative of, what is commonly referred to as probably Adderall or something like that, or Kratom, probably, just because it's more accessible. So they're constantly faking or just trying to scare us with absolute nonsense. How about Michael Malice? What are some things you learned from Michael Malice?
Michael Malice is another guy that just the way that he kind of puts things into perspective, kind of like one of his big one of the big catchphrases that he says is that conservatism is progressivism driving the speed limit. And it's like, okay, so progressives were, like pro-gay marriage or something like that. And then now conservatives are, gay marriage is fine. When before
in fact, Caitlyn Jenner's running. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So just how, even though the progressives are here, it's only going to be a matter of time until the conservatives, they're like, oh yeah, I agree with that too. I mean, at the very least, maybe not, people wouldn't agree with them, but at the very least, if conservatives were, even nowadays, if they were still, no, we still think marriage should be between a man and a woman, at least we would have a difference. Like, oh yeah, a Democrat progressive believes in gay marriage and a Republican conservative thinks that it should be a man and a woman. Okay, well now at least I know where they're coming from, not just, oh yeah, I'm a Republican conservative, but I don't have a problem with gay marriage. It's fine. If a Democrat progressive heard that and they go, why? I mean, they're probably going to vote for him anyway. But even still, it's like, why am I going to vote for that person? I'll just vote for the Democrat and progressive.
Exactly. Yeah, I see that as saying that conservatives, rather, don't really have a solid foundation to refer to. So if they say something like, well, what the founders wanted is, well, okay, the founders of North Korea, Kim Il-sung, wanted there to be a dictatorship. So therefore, dictatorship is moral because that was their country's founding. Well, no, it's democracy, so mob rule. Well, no, it's a republic where you have representatives. But then you can see the representatives don't even represent the people, and the people are ignorant, so you probably don't even want them having representation in the first place. So it's on such, it lacks such solid ground that it's no wonder that they just follow the people that are actually in power, controlling the press and everything.
Yeah, and I don't know if Michael Mouse will ever see this or not, but I'm just going to go ahead and say that of all the guys that have influenced me or that I kind of, I guess, look up to, I suppose, politically, he's the one that I think intimidates me the most because just his social media presence, I feel if you say one wrong thing, or not even a wrong thing, even if it's such thing he doesn't like, he'll just block you and get, ostracize you, but okay, I'm done. So sometimes I don't even want to interact with him because I'm saying, oh man, even if I agree with this guy, he might just still block me because maybe the word I used was wrong or something. I don't know. So Michael, if you ever watch this, I'm intimidated by you, and I know that I'm 6 foot and you're the Willy Wonka of politics, as Dave Rubin calls you, but that's how I feel.
Most important thing you learn from the works and contributions of Tom Woods.
Oh, Tom Woods. Oh yeah, that guy. He's another one like Dave, where he kind of just breaks the mold of the 3x5 card of allowable opinion. I feel like I'm just telling everyone the catchphrases of all these people. That's like the whole thing. Just their catchphrases. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So, but I mean, Tom is just his just the amount of stuff that he puts out all the time. It's really admirable just how much he works. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned. It's maybe not just what he says politically, it's just his work ethic is just absolutely incredible. And
yeah,
I think that's definitely something that people can, I guess, latch onto. But in terms of just what he says or what he believes in politically, I mean, these guys are kind of interchangeable in terms of how they believe or what they believe in, because they're kind of all in the same ilk, I suppose. But Tom is another good communicator like Dave, where he can, even though he comes at a more of a scholarly way of doing it, where Dave is kind of more, I guess, the street smart type of way, I suppose you can say, because he's kind of more of the, I mean, he's a stand-up comic and Legion of Skanks, so of course he has a different audience than Tom. But the way that he kind of talks about capitalism, and I mean the cartoon that he has with Michael Malice, I'm watching those, and him talking about Woodrow Wilson and how, oh yeah, everyone was saying Woodrow Wilson is, or not everybody, but all these scholarly people, every time they rank, they ask these high scholarly people what their ranking of presidents is. Woodrow Wilson is for some reason always near the top. I don't get it. And learning about how Woodrow Wilson was this huge racist, and they didn't mention it in the episode, but like the whole Federal Reserve, I think, happened while he was president, I believe. But yeah, just how he kind of conveys his message, I think, is really good.
Yeah, Tom is definitely an excellent communicator. I want to go into foreign policy because this was one where I was a conservative for so long. It was really the foreign policy element that I thought the libertarians, voluntarists were pretty good except for foreign policy. What was it about the work of Scott Horton that you found so attractive?
He's another one that if it wasn't for Dave, I probably would have got to him eventually, but if it wasn't for Dave, then I would have never gotten into Scott as early as I did. But just talking about how, and I said this earlier too, and I'll probably say this again, but just the R and the D, it doesn't really matter, because how it's supposed to be is that the D's are supposed to be doves. They're supposed to love peace. They're supposed to want no bloodshed and not want the wars to be going on. And the R's are supposed to be the ones that are like, no, we gotta spread American democracy. That's how it was supposed to be. But nowadays it's basically just they're all the same. And I think for me that was the biggest issue, the foreign policy for sure, where it really lit a candle over my head, where I was just like, yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, Joe Biden was he's one of the biggest warmongers. Obama was supposed to be this peace president, and of course he started wars. George W. Bush, when he was running for president in the debates without going, he's like, oh, we should be doing these nation building things, whatever. And of course, the whole war on terror basically started under him. And Donald Trump is another one. Oh yeah, these wars are stupid. Your brother led us into war, and of course Donald Trump still did all the things. He was being really hawkish towards Russia and getting out of the Iran nuclear deal and all this stuff. I guess, because I know some people say, well, he didn't start any wars, but I mean, he still amped them up. And I know he tried to get out of Afghanistan, but we're still over there and all that. But that was one of those big issues that Scott really hounded on with his guests and everything, where I think that's the biggest issue for me that I think care about the most, because I feel if we stopped a lot of the foreign policy, even just 50% of it, it would solve a lot of the problems that we're dealing with here at home. And
yeah. There was a great part in Scott's book on page 38 where he quotes Deputy Secretary of Defense Paul Wolfowitz in an interview with Sam Tanihasa of Vanity Fair in 2003. So here's Paul Wolfowitz in an interview with Vanity Fair. Very few people are going to read. Contrast this with what Bush is saying about why the terrorists hate us. There are a lot of things that are different now that the U.S. occupies Iraq. And one that has gone almost unnoticed, but it's huge. It's that we can now remove almost all our forces from Saudi Arabia. Their presence there over the last 12 years have been a source of enormous difficulty for a friendly government. It's been a huge recruiting device for al-Qaeda. In fact, if you look at bin Laden, one of his principal grievances was the presence of so-called Crusader forces on the Holy Land, Mecca and Medina. I think just lifting that burden from the Saudis is itself going to open the door to other positive things. I don't want to speak in messianic terms. It's not going to be changes overnight, but it's a huge improvement. Isn't that a little different than they hate us because girls go to school in America?
Yeah.
My God. What was it for you that was it any empirical evidence? Was it trying to put yourself in the shoes of countries the U.S. is occupying? How was it that you were able to question the war machine?
Well, definitely putting your shoe on the other foot, I think, helped. Where if Russia or China invaded us, then we would have blowback, and there'd probably be a bunch of American terrorist groups going after Russia and China, and that's what we see nowadays with all ISIS and Al Qaeda, and when Ron Paul had that Rudy Giuliani moment talking about, well, just like how you were talking about where, oh, they don't hate us because of our freedoms. They hate us because we're over there bombing the crap out of them. And that was another big moment for me. But I think it's just, if you're for the non-aggression principle, I don't know how you can somewhat justify what's going on, because, okay, if we were truly going after the people that knocked the towers down on 9/11, then, and I'm not justifying, I'm not saying I would agree with, but I'm just saying, wouldn't we be starting this war against Saudi Arabia, not Afghanistan, right? Because as far as I know, isn't Saudi Arabia, it wasn't a lot of terrorists during 9/11, weren't a lot of them from Saudi Arabia? But apparently nobody, oh yes, but Saudi Arabia is an ally of ours, so we can't screw that up. Am I wrong there?
Yeah. So according to Philip Zelikows' 9/11 Commission report, 15 of the 19 were from Saudi Arabia. The others were from Egypt. The guy motivated by Ayman al-Zawahiri, another guy from United Arab Emirates, and these sorts of places. So of course, but it's a lot harder to paint them as the enemy when you can always have that as a card to play later. I mean, Afghanistan and Al Qaeda were just so perfect. And there's another part in Scott's book that was a major red pill moment for me on page 51. He lists off. This was so great because he lists off a number of sources. So it's not just hearsay or, well, maybe this reporter got it wrong. CBC News 2001. White House says no to Taliban demand for proof. On the intern press service, U.S. refusal of 2001 Taliban offer gave bin Laden a free pass. ABC News 2001 October. U.S. rejects new Taliban offer. Bush rejects Taliban offer. Washington Post. New offer on bin Laden. The Guardian, October 16, 2001. So when you see that there was actually an offer to hand over the world's most wanted man, you realize they didn't want the most wanted man, because then they wouldn't have this enemy to go after. And when you start seeing that these things, it's not that they're so hidden, it's that the evidence is there, but they amplify so much other trivial nonsense. Net neutrality is going to kill us. Florida's lifting restrictions. Greg Abbott can't stand up, but can't stand up to whatever. He can't stand up to the insurrectionists, or just one of those clever lines. Anything else on Scott Horton or conflicts of interest, also known as foreign policy focus, Kyle Anzalone's foreign policy work?
Oh yeah, Kyle's great. Kyle is basically just like a branch off of Scott Horton, and I was just saying that because I wanted to shout out foreign policy focus and conflicts of interest. He and Will Porter's new show, and I just wanted to shout them out. I think they're doing incredible work. They're saying a lot of the things that even some libertarians are afraid of talking about, especially with the Israel-Palestine thing that's in the news right now. They're basically saying, hey, this is all this, like, Palestine is occupied by Israel, and so we're going to talk about that. This isn't some, like, oh, one's good and one's bad. Or, well, actually, that is the point. One's good. This isn't some, like, nuanced take. It should be, no, Israel is occupying one people, and we should be defending these people, or at the very least saying, well, they're being genocided and they're being ethnically cleansed. And they're just outright saying it. They're not being afraid. I think they're one of the most unafraid shows out there. And they need to be amped up. More people need to know about conflicts of interest. And I know they mainly talk about foreign policy, and I know foreign policy isn't some sexy issue, but it's probably the most important issue. And so I'm just basically saying that to spread their message out. And they're also one of the ones where, when the whole Russiagate stuff was happening, they're another one of those shows that were just going right through and saying this was all stupid. I don't know how people could say Trump is this Russian puppet when he's being really hawkish towards Russia, as I had alluded to earlier. So they're just really unafraid, and they're not scared to speak their mind. And I really respect them for that.
Exactly. And finally, Free Man Beyond the Wall, my friend and colleague at the Libertarian Institute, along with Kyle and Scott. What are some of the things you learned from Pete Quinones?
Oh, Pete Quinones is great. He, as Scott calls him, the firebrand. He's another one, just like Kyle will, he'll just speak his mind. He's not afraid. If he'll just kick your ass, basically verbally, and I respect him for that. I really like him. And I know some people probably get rubbed off the wrong way with how he says things, whatever, but I really like his show. He has some of the most interesting guests on that you won't find anywhere else, I don't think. And I mean, especially with the coof flu and all that. He's another one that's just been knocking it out of the park and not afraid to say, well, I mean, this is one of the things that's kind of annoyed me about this is that, and I really do think that if you weren't convinced that there's all these factions of libertarianism, this issue alone should have really solidified it for you, because there are libertarians who say, no, well, you know, they said the CDC and the government said wear a mask and get the vaccine. Well, you should get it. But okay, so if we're supposed to hate the corporate press, and this is kind of going back to like foreign policy, we're supposed to hate the corporate press and not believe in anything they say. But when it comes to Israel or Palestine, well, I'm just going to take it at the word and say everything they're saying 100% is true. Okay, cool. But the same thing with the COVID and vaccine or whatever. Oh yeah, I don't like the state, but I guess I'll just get the vaccine because they said so. Because Dr. Fauci is my overlord. I'm going to listen to everything he says. I thought libertarians were supposed to be this anti-state, this rebellious people, but it's like it gets really confusing and kind of annoying that you see libertarians fighting over this, and I'm like, you should be on the same side. And he's one of those people that says that, where he's like, I don't know how you can think this way. It should be this way. And that's just one of the things that I admire about the guy.
Exactly. More proof that even libertarians can't be trusted. With power, they will use it for evil. Shane, thank you so much for your time. Check out the show, What's HAPAning? Links in the description below. Thank you for watching Keith Knight Don't Tread on Anyone in the Libertarian Institute. Shane, thank you for your time, brother.
Thanks, Keith. I really appreciate you having me on.